"Get this street trash out of my lounge." That is what Derek said, loud enough for 50 guests holding $100 martinis to hear while pointing at the man in the faded denim jacket sitting quietly in the leather armchair. The man looked up. He did not move. He did not speak. "Call security." Derek snapped his fingers twice hard like cracking bone. The guard crossed the marble floor in 4 steps and clamped both hands onto the man's shoulders. The man let it happen. He looked down at the scarred leather portfolio on the floor beside his sneaker. His jaw tightened once.
Wrong move. He just assaulted the man who bought the building 20 minutes ago. Let's dive in.
12 hours earlier, the Sterling Grand Hotel hummed. It breathed cool, filtered air. It smelled of cut flowers, warm leather, and the quiet arrogance of serious money. Derek stood at the velvet rope like a man who had been born for exactly this post. His Italian suit was pressed to a razor edge. His platinum lapel pin caught the light of 3 crystal chandeliers. His hair gelled into a solid, immovable shape, gleamed under the lobby's soft, amber glow. He held the gold-plated hook of the velvet rope in one hand, and he turned no one away by accident. Every refusal, every cold glance, every dismissive flick of the wrist was a performance. Deliberate, calculated, fully rehearsed. The VIP lounge behind him pulsed with low jazz and the sound of heavy crystal meeting polished marble. Inside, his patrons drank. They laughed. They occupied the deep leather armchairs the way the truly wealthy always did, as if the furniture had been assembled specifically around their bodies. Derek watched them with the eyes of a man protecting something sacred. He turned 2 men away at 9:04 a.m. Both were well-dressed. Both were polite. One had the wrong face. The other had the wrong accent. Derek smiled at each of them with his teeth and directed them toward the public lobby seating near the east corridor. He used the phrase, "exclusive membership access only." He said it gently. He said it the way a man says something untrue when he has said it so many times it no longer feels untrue. Sarah watched from the hostess stand near the elevator bank. She kept her hands folded. She kept her face composed. She had worked the morning shift at the Sterling Grand for 11 months, and she had learned early that the cost of speaking was high and the reward was nothing. So she stood still and she watched, and her mouth stayed closed. At 9:17 a.m., the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby slid open. The man who stepped out wore faded denim. His jacket was the color of something washed too many times, the collar frayed at one corner where the thread had given up. His canvas sneakers were scuffed along the toe cap, the rubber sole separating slightly at the left heel. He was not tall, not broad, not physically remarkable in any way that the lobby of the Sterling Grand was designed to reward. He carried a leather portfolio, old and scarred, secured at both ends by heavy combination locks that did not match the rest of him at all. He walked slowly, not the slow walk of a man who was lost, the slow walk of a man who was in some deep and private way exhausted. His eyes were steady, but there were shadows beneath them, the kind that come from a full night spent under fluorescent lights making decisions that alter things permanently. He stopped at the entrance to the VIP lounge. Derek saw him at once. The appraisal took under 2 seconds, practiced and complete. The sneakers, the jacket, the fraying collar, the scuffed portfolio that looked like it had survived something. Derek's chin lifted. His mouth arranged itself into a shape that was not quite a smile. "Public restrooms," Derek said, "are down the street." Marcus looked at him. He did not react. He did not flush or shift his weight or look down at the floor. He simply looked at Derek the way a man looks at a door he has already decided to open. "I was hoping for a cup of coffee," Marcus said. "This," Derek said, his hand settling flat against the velvet rope, "is a private lounge. Members and invited guests only." He let the pause sit there. "I'm sure you understand." Behind Derek, a socialite in a cream blazer glanced over. She registered the exchange. She turned back to her companion and murmured something. Both of them smiled. Marcus did not move. His hand tightened once briefly around the combination locks of the portfolio. Not in anger. In something quieter than anger. "Is there a manager I could speak with?" he asked. Derek's smile widened. It was the smile of a man who had been asked this question before and had enjoyed answering it every time. "You're speaking with him," he said. "Derek Holt, VIP lounge manager." He touched the brass name tag on his lapel, a small, proud gesture. "And I'm asking you to move along." Sarah's hands tightened against each other at the hostess stand. She watched Marcus look at the name tag. She watched something pass across his face, so brief and so controlled that she could not have named it if she tried. His eyes moved from the name tag to Derek's face, and he held that for a moment. "I'll remember that name," Marcus said, quietly, without edge. Derek laughed. It was a short, satisfied sound. "I'm sure you will," he said. A few guests in the nearest booth had turned to observe. One of them, a man in a charcoal blazer with a heavy watch on his wrist, watched with the mild curiosity of a person observing a small inconvenience being handled correctly. Derek felt the weight of that attention. He stood straighter. The performance required an audience, and the audience had arrived. Marcus did not argue. He did not escalate. He stepped back from the rope without hurry, turned and walked toward the lobby, seating near the corridor. His sneakers made no sound on the marble floor. He sat down on a low bench along the eastern wall and set the portfolio across his knees. He did not look back at Derek. Derek watched him settle. He watched the faded jacket, the scarred leather case, the scuffed canvas shoes resting flat on the Sterling Grand's imported marble. He watched the man close his eyes for a moment. Just one moment. The way a person does when they are very tired and the silence costs them nothing. Then Derek turned back to his lounge, to his patrons, to the crystal-lit world he curated and controlled. He straightened his platinum pin. He dropped the gold-plated hook of the velvet rope back into its bracket with a clean, definitive click. He had no way to know that the man on the bench had 47 minutes ago upstairs in the executive boardroom signed his name to a document that transferred ownership of the building they were both standing in. He had no way to know that the portfolio on the man's knees contained that document. He had no way to know that the thing he had just locked out with such satisfaction was not a problem. It was the new owner. On the bench by the east wall, Marcus opened his eyes. He looked down at the combination locks on the portfolio. He pressed his thumb to one quietly, the way a man touches something he knows is waiting. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened a banking application. A progress bar filled the screen, slow and deliberate loading toward a number that would in a few hours change the nature of everything happening in this room. He watched it load. He closed his eyes again. He was for now simply a tired man on a bench. The lobby moved around him, indifferent and bright. No one here knew what he was holding. No one here knew what the lock secured. The man who had just turned him away was standing 20 feet from his future, straightening his platinum pin, entirely satisfied with himself, with no idea at all that the velvet rope had not kept the riffraff out. It had locked the executioner in. The boardroom on the top floor of the Sterling Grand did not look like a battlefield. It looked like a room designed to make men feel significant. The long table was dark walnut, polished to a depth that reflected the faces of the people sitting around it. The chairs were leather-heavy and high-backed. The windows behind the head seat ran floor to ceiling, and through them, the city spread out in every direction, patient and indifferent, the way cities always are when money is being divided. Marcus had sat at the foot of that table for 11 hours and 40 minutes. He had arrived at 9:40 the previous evening in the same denim jacket, the same canvas sneakers, the same scarred portfolio. The opposing counsel had noticed. 3 of the 4 board members had noticed. The lead negotiator for the old ownership group, a man named Garrett with silver cufflinks and a practiced frown, had noticed most of all. Garrett had looked at Marcus the way Derek would look at him 11 hours later, with the same quiet, pleasurable certainty that the measure of a man was the quality of his watch. Marcus had not worn a watch. The negotiation had been brutal, technical, and long. Garrett's team arrived with leverage. They had debt structures pending litigation, deferred maintenance estimates, and a renovation clause they believed was airtight. They presented these instruments in sequence, each one designed to depress the acquisition price, to force concessions, to make Marcus come to the table on his knees. He did not come to the table on his knees. He worked through each instrument with the same flat, unhurried patience he had shown at the velvet rope. He dismantled the debt structures with 4 sentences. He identified the flaw in the litigation clause, a procedural defect that had been overlooked for 14 months. He produced from the scarred leather portfolio a third-party maintenance assessment commissioned 6 weeks earlier that rendered the renovation clause functionally unenforceable. Garrett had stared at the assessment for a long time. His silver cufflinks caught the light above the table. He said nothing. By 6 a.m., the signatures were wet on the parchment. By 8:30, the wire transfer had been initiated. By 9:09, Marcus had ridden the elevator down from the 32nd floor to the lobby, carrying the portfolio with both combination locks secured, looking for a quiet place to sit and a cup of coffee that cost less than $40. He had not found either. Down in the lobby at the hostess stand near the elevator bank, Sarah watched the morning shift accelerate into its familiar shape. The lounge filled. The jazz overhead shifted from something sparse to something warmer. Derek circulated among his patrons with the fluid ease of a man in his element, laughing at the right moments, refilling the right glasses, ensuring that everyone with money felt seen. She noticed the man on the bench by the east wall. He had been sitting there for 20 minutes. He had not moved for most of it. His eyes had been closed, then open, then closed again. His hands rested on the combination locks of his portfolio with a stillness that looked to her less like calm and more like the last form of self-possession a person maintains when everything else has been spent. She recognized exhaustion. She had worked doubles back-to-back for 3 weeks the previous winter. She knew what it looked like when a body had given everything available and was now running on the memory of energy rather than the substance of it. She poured water from the lobby dispenser into a plastic cup. The cup was thin utilitarian, the kind kept in the service quarter for staff use. Not crystal, not weighted, not the kind of cup that belonged anywhere near the Sterling Grand's front-facing image. She carried it across the marble floor anyway. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "You look like you could use this." Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at the cup, then he looked at her, and something in his face shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that rewrote his expression entirely, but in the small, specific way that happens when a person is offered something unexpectedly decent after a long time without it. "Thank you," he said. He meant it. She could hear that he meant it. She had not yet said anything else when Derek appeared at her elbow. He had crossed the lobby in under 15 seconds. His voice, when it arrived, was low and precise and designed to carry exactly as far as he intended it to carry. "What are you doing?" he said. Sarah turned. "He looked tired. You thought, Derek said. He let the 2 words sit there, compressed and final. His eyes moved to the plastic cup in Marcus's hand, then back to her face. "You are wasting company resources on a vagrant who has already been removed from the lounge once this morning." "Does that sound like your job to you?" Sarah said nothing. Her face stayed composed. Inside, something tightened and stayed tight. Derek reached forward and took the cup from Marcus's hand. He set it on the edge of a nearby console table with a small, precise click like a period placed at the end of an argument. Then he looked at Marcus with the flat, finished expression of a man removing an obstacle. "Do not approach my guests," he said to Sarah without looking at her, "and do not approach this individual again." He straightened the platinum pin on his lapel. "If I see it happen a second time, we will have a very different conversation." He turned and walked back toward the lounge. Sarah stood still. The plastic cup sat on the console table, empty, thin-walled, already beginning to look like something that had never mattered. Around her, the lobby continued without interruption. The jazz played, the crystal glasses clinked. The wealthy patrons moved through their morning with the ease of people who had never once been made to feel like a problem. At the far end of the lobby, near the concierge desk, 2 members of the front desk staff were speaking in low, urgent tones. Sarah caught fragments. A billionaire investor, arriving today, the hotel's future, a name no one had been given yet. She looked back at the man on the bench. He had produced a paper napkin from his jacket pocket. He was using it to wipe a smear of something off the corner of the portfolio's lock. His movements were quiet, economical, unhurried. He looked like a man who had learned a long time ago not to need an audience for anything he did. The front desk staff kept talking. The name they said would be announced at noon. Sarah looked at the bench. She looked at the staff. She looked back at the bench. The thought arrived without drama, and she pushed it away immediately because it was too large and too strange, and there was no way it could be true. There was no way. The bench had edges. Marcus had discovered this slowly, the way discomfort always announces itself quietly at first, then with increasing insistence. The wooden frame pressed into the back of his thighs. His left shoulder, stiff from 11 hours in a boardroom chair, had begun to ache with a specific grinding persistence that rest was no longer fixing. He stood. He steadied himself. He picked up the portfolio. The lounge entrance was 10 feet away. The armchairs inside were deep and wide and upholstered in the kind of leather that absorbed a person entirely. He had sat in chairs like those before. He owned chairs like those. He walked to the entrance, unhooked the velvet rope himself, stepped past it, and sat down in the nearest empty armchair with the slow, deliberate movement of a man whose body had stopped asking permission. He set the portfolio across his knees. He closed his eyes. For 40 seconds, nothing happened. Then Derek arrived. He did not walk. He advanced. His Italian shoes struck the marble in a rhythm that was designed consciously or not to announce him before he appeared. His face, when Marcus opened his eyes and looked up at it, was the face of a man who had found exactly the provocation he had been waiting for all morning. In Derek's hand was the paper coffee cup Sarah had managed to find for Marcus, earlier retrieved from the console table where Derek had placed it. He had refilled it from the service corridor pot, the cheap, bitter, burnt-smelling brew kept for staff. Marcus recognized the smell. It was the smell of function without comfort, of something made to do a job and nothing more. He had been grateful for it. Derek held it up between two fingers delicately, the way a man holds something that offends him. His platinum pin caught the chandelier light. Around them, 3 nearby tables of patrons had already noticed the approach. The performance had an audience. Derek knew it. His posture confirmed it. "This," Derek said loudly, "does not belong in here." He was not looking at the cup when he said it. Marcus said nothing. His hands rested on the combination locks of the portfolio. Steady, flat, still. Derek stepped to the large white marble planter beside the armchair, a deep imported vessel filled with an architectural arrangement of white orchids, and he upended the paper cup over it. The cheap coffee poured out in a dark, spreading stain, soaking into the pale marble, pooling at the base of the orchid stems, bleeding outward in a shape that would not clean easily. The liquid splashed. A single drop of it crossed the air and landed on the back of Marcus's bare hand, close enough to the skin to carry heat. He did not flinch. He looked at the drop. He looked at the stain spreading across the white marble. He looked up at Derek. "You are contaminating," Derek said, his voice rising into the room with a clarity that ensured every nearby patron could follow it. "A 5-star environment. You are sitting in a seat you did not pay for, in a facility you were not invited into, drinking coffee that was taken from staff supplies without authorization." He straightened. He pulled at the cuff of his jacket. "I don't know how many times I need to remove you before you understand that you do not belong here." At the table nearest the window, a man in a charcoal blazer watched with calm, entertained eyes. His companion, a woman in a structured cream jacket, tilted her head slightly. She reached for her champagne flute. Her fingers wrapped around the heavy crystal stem were relaxed. Marcus looked at his hand. The drop of coffee had cooled. It sat on his skin in a small, dark circle. "I wasn't aware," Marcus said evenly, "that sitting in an empty chair required authorization." "In my lounge," Derek said, "everything requires authorization." He leaned forward. Not far, just enough to make the geometry of the moment clear. "Only the owner of this hotel could save you from being arrested right now, and I can assure you the owner is not coming." The words sat in the air between them. Marcus looked at Derek for a long moment. Not with anger, not with the flushed, accelerating energy of a man being humiliated and responding to it, with something that was, if anything, the opposite. A settled quality. A quality of a person who has heard something interesting said by someone who does not know it is interesting. "I see," Marcus said. Derek's chin lifted. "Get up," he said. "Now." Marcus did not get up immediately. He looked once more at the dark stains spreading across the white marble planter. The coffee had reached the edge of the vessel's inner lip. It moved in a slow, inevitable way, filling the small crevices, finding the low places. It would be there for a while. Marble was porous. The color would set. He noticed that Derek had not noticed the stain. Derek was looking at him because the room was watching Derek manage a problem, and the stain was not the problem Derek was performing for. Marcus stood. He lifted the portfolio. He held it at his side, both combination locks facing outward. "You mentioned," Marcus said quietly, "that only the owner of the hotel could intervene." He paused. He looked at Derek's brass name tag with the same brief, precise attention he had given it at the velvet rope. "I'll remember that." Derek stared at him. The phrase was familiar. It was the same thing the man had said at the rope 2 hours earlier in exactly the same tone. It had meant nothing then. It meant nothing now. It was the kind of thing people said when they had nothing else. He watched Marcus walk to a chair along the far wall and sit down again, portfolio across his knees, hands resting flat on the locks. Derek turned back to his lounge. He adjusted his platinum pin. He accepted a small, approving nod from the man in the charcoal blazer and returned it with a practiced, satisfied smile. He was pouring coffee on the shoes of the one man who could personally sign his severance check. He did not know this. He knew only that the lounge was clean, the patrons were pleased, and the problem for now had been managed. The dark stain on the white marble planter sat behind him, quiet and permanent, waiting for a chapter that had not arrived yet.
Absolutely not. He snatched an exhausted man's coffee and dumped it on the floor just to humiliate him. If that were me, I'd have snapped. Sitting there while an arrogant manager degrades you just to entertain wealthy guests. The audacity is unreal.
Derek had a theory about public spaces. Order, he believed, was not maintained quietly. It was demonstrated. It was performed repeatedly for the benefit of the people who needed to see it performed so that they understood what kind of room they were in and what kind of man was running it. He had been watching Marcus for 40 minutes from across the lounge. The man had not moved. He had not approached another guest. He had not spoken to anyone, asked for anything, or done a single thing that could be cited as a violation of any specific rule. He simply sat in the chair along the far wall, portfolio across his knees, eyes open, breathing, existing. Occupying space with a stillness that Derek found, for reasons he could not have articulated cleanly, profoundly offensive. He crossed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek said. His voice landed in the lounge at a volume carefully calibrated to reach every table. He stopped 6 feet from Marcus's chair and faced the room rather than the man, a staging choice deliberate and practiced. "I want to apologize for the disruption this morning. It appears we have an individual who has repeatedly ignored our access policy and re-entered a restricted area." He paused. "I have reason to believe he may be casing this facility." The word casing did specific work. Derek had chosen it precisely. At the nearest table, a woman in a sapphire wrap dress reached for her handbag and moved it to her lap. The man in the charcoal blazer sat forward. 2 guests near the window exchanged a glance. 3 phones appeared above table-level screens, forward recording. Marcus looked at Derek. His face did not change. "I haven't touched anything in this room," Marcus said, quietly. Not to the audience, to Derek. Derek turned to face him now, slowly, for the cameras. "Sir," he said, with a patience engineered to sound like condescension, "I'm not asking for your commentary. I'm asking you to stand up and come with me." "On what basis?" Marcus asked. On the basis, Derek said, that this is a private facility, that you have been removed from it twice already this morning, and that your continued presence constitutes trespass. He tilted his head. Or would you prefer I call the police and let them explain it? The lounge had gone quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when people stop pretending they are not watching. The jazz played on overhead, incongruously smooth, a warm and indifferent backdrop to what was happening below it. Crystal glasses sat untouched. Conversations had not resumed. Sarah stood at the hostess stand near the entrance. Her hands were folded. Her face was composed. Inside her chest had closed to the diameter of a drinking straw. She stepped forward. "Mr. Holt," she said. Her voice was steady, which cost her something. "I don't think this is Sarah." Derek did not look at her. The single word carried the full weight of 11 months of established hierarchy. "Return to your station." "He hasn't done anything," she said. "He's been sitting quietly. He hasn't." Derek turned. His eyes found hers with the flat surgical precision of a man who has identified a problem and is deciding how quickly to resolve it. "One more word," he said, "and you can collect your things from the back office. Do you understand me?" Sarah's mouth closed. Her hands tightened against each other. She did not move back to her station. She also did not speak again. Derek turned back to Marcus. He produced his radio from his belt, heavy and tactical, its surface scratched from use, and pressed the call button with the deliberate slowness of a man who wants the action witnessed. "This is Holt at the VIP lounge. I need security at the lounge entrance. One individual non-compliant possible trespass situation." He released the button. He looked at Marcus. "Last chance," he said. "Stand up and walk out on your own, or you get walked out." Marcus placed his right hand over the dual combination locks of the portfolio. Not defensively, not urgently. With the quiet, precise deliberateness of a man securing something important before a storm. His thumb rested on the left lock. His fingers covered the right. "I'll stay where I am," Marcus said. The guard arrived in under 90 seconds. He was large, broad through the shoulders, moving with the efficient, forward-leaning energy of someone who had been told there was a problem and had already decided how it ended. His tactical belt carried a radio, a baton clip, and a set of restraints. He stopped beside Derek and looked at Marcus the way people look at things they have been authorized to move. "This the one," he said. "Remove him," Derek said. "From the building." Sarah made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when something is happening and the gap between what they can do and what they want to do is too wide to cross. The guard reached Marcus in 4 steps. His hands came down on Marcus's shoulders, heavy and practiced, the grip of someone trained to establish physical control before a situation can organize itself into resistance. He pulled Marcus upward and back, twisting both arms behind him in a single motion, and the leather portfolio slid from Marcus's knees and struck the marble floor with a flat, resonant sound. Derek looked down at it. The combination locks faced upward. The leather was old and dark and scarred along both edges. The locks themselves were solid, heavy, expensive in a way that did not match anything else about the man who had been carrying it. Derek reached down and picked it up. "I'll need to check this," he said. Suspected stolen property. The lounge was recording. Every phone was up. Every face was turned toward the scene at the far wall where a man in a faded denim jacket stood restrained between a security officer's hands, arms pinned behind his back, while an arrogant manager in an Italian suit held a locked portfolio and smiled at the room. Derek wanted an audience for his dominance. He had won complete and entirely catastrophically attentive. If you want to see how this arrogance backfires, you know what to do. Now back to Marcus. The guard's grip did not loosen. It tightened. Marcus felt the pressure move from his shoulders into the joint itself, a deep, grinding burn that traveled up into the socket and stayed there. His arms were locked behind him at an angle that was not quite dislocating and not quite manageable. He breathed through it. Slowly, through the nose, the way a person breathes when the alternative is to make a sound they do not want to make. Around him, the lounge continued its quiet recording. Phones held steady, faces watched. The jazz played on warm and entirely wrong for the room. Derek stood 3 feet away holding the portfolio. He turned it over in his hands with the careful, theatrical interest of a man performing a search for an audience. His fingers moved over the scarred leather, pressing along the edges, testing the seams. He found nothing. Of course, he found nothing. The locks were solid dual-combination aircraft-grade steel set into reinforced frames. They did not yield to pressure. They did not yield to anything except the correct sequence, and the correct sequence lived only in Marcus's memory. Derek shook the portfolio once. Nothing shifted inside. Nothing rattled. He looked at the locks with the expression of a man encountering an obstacle he had not expected and did not intend to respect. "Open it," Derek said. Marcus looked at him. His arms burned. His shoulder joint screamed in a language that was becoming difficult to translate into stillness. He said nothing. "Open it," Derek said again louder, "for the cameras, for the room. Or I will assume the contents are stolen and hold it for the police." Sarah at the lounge entrance pressed one hand flat against the hostess stand. Her knuckles were pale. She was watching Marcus's face with the focused, helpless attention of someone witnessing an accident from behind glass. Marcus looked at the floor, not in defeat. He looked at it the way a person looks at the one surface that is not performing, not recording, not waiting for a reaction. The marble was cool and white and permanent. The dark stain from the spilled coffee 3 feet to his left had dried into the stone. It was not going anywhere. It would be there tomorrow and the day after, and for every day following that the building stood, his building. The thought arrived without drama. It arrived the way true things arrive, quietly without needing announcement. His building, his marble, his lounge. The stain on the floor of his property, put there by a man currently holding his acquisition contract in both hands and demanding he open it. Something almost broke. He felt it, a seam somewhere deep running along the inside of his composure, pressing outward. He was exhausted in a way that sleep would not fix immediately. He was restrained. He was surrounded by people recording his humiliation for distribution. He was being held by a man following orders from a man who had decided in under 2 seconds, based on a jacket and a pair of shoes, exactly what kind of person Marcus was, and exactly how much that person deserved. He looked at the floor and he breathed. Gone, he thought. The negotiation, the 11 hours, the signatures, all of it buried under the weight of a grip he could not break without making this worse. 11 months of preparation, 18 months of due diligence before that. The debt analysis, the litigation review, the maintenance assessment produced from this same portfolio now in Derek's hands. All of it. Every last piece. Sitting here on the marble floor of a lounge he owned, held down by a guard following orders from a man wearing a name tag he had already memorized. The guard applied more pressure. Marcus's head dropped. Not far. An inch. The involuntary concession of a body that had reached its current limit. His chin lowered toward his chest. His eyes closed. The lounge watched. Derek watched. Sarah watched. And her hand on the hostess stand was shaking now, which she could not stop, and she had stopped trying. Then his smartwatch vibrated. Once. Twice. The precise, short, double pulse of a priority notification felt against the inside of his wrist bone where the guard's grip had pushed his sleeve upward. He could not raise his arm, he could not turn his wrist, but the watch face had rotated outward in the struggle, and from the angle of his lowered head he could read it. 4 words and a number. Wire transfer cleared, escrow closed. He read it once. He read it again. He held the words still inside him the way you hold a small flame still in wind. The number beside the transfer confirmation was $500 million. He breathed out, slowly, completely. Something in his chest did not break. It reorganized. It found a new shape, smaller and harder and considerably more dangerous than the shape it had been 30 seconds ago. The seam that had been pressing outward stopped pressing. It sealed. It became a line, clean and permanent, like the edge of a signed document. He raised his head. His eyes found Derek across the room. Derek holding the portfolio. Derek with his platinum pin and his gelled hair and his brass name tag that Marcus had now read 3 times and would not forget. Derek, who had told him in this room 2 hours ago that only the owner of the hotel could save him. Marcus looked at him without expression. The trap had snapped shut on the underdog. Every phone in the room confirmed it. Every face in the lounge had witnessed it. A man in a faded jacket, restrained head bowed, arms pinned portfolio, confiscated with nowhere left to go and nothing left to try. That was what the room saw. What the room did not see was the countdown. It had not been running down. It had just hit 0. Enough. One word. Quiet. Absolute. It did not fill the room the way Derek's announcements filled it. It did not need to. It arrived the way pressure arrives, not as sound, but as a change in the air, a shift in the atmospheric quality of the space that made 3 guests lower their phones before they understood why. The guard felt it first. Marcus moved without warning and without wasted motion. His right shoulder dropped. His left elbow drove back. The technique was compact, precise, and applied to exactly the joint and angle required to break a standing grip without escalating into a strike. The guard stumbled. His hands opened. He stepped back 2 paces and stood there with the expression of a man who has just discovered that what he was holding was not what he thought it was. Marcus straightened. He rolled his left shoulder once, slowly feeling the joint resettle. He adjusted the cuff of his denim jacket. He looked at the guard with a flatness that was not anger and not contempt. It was assessment. The guard correctly did not move. Marcus walked toward Derek. Not fast, not slow. The walk of a man crossing a room he owns, covering ground he has already measured, arriving at a destination he identified some time ago. His canvas sneakers made no sound on the marble. The lounge was silent in a way it had not been silent before, a deeper silence than the one that had fallen during the confrontation, the silence of a room that has stopped performing and started paying attention. Derek took 1 step back. Then he stopped himself. He was still holding the portfolio. His fingers had tightened around it during the 2 seconds it took Marcus to cross the distance between them, and his knuckles beneath the tailored cuff of his Italian jacket had gone pale. Marcus stopped in front of him. He held out his hand. Derek did not move. Marcus waited. 3 seconds. 4. He did not repeat himself. He did not reach for the portfolio. He simply stood, hand extended, with the particular quality of patience that belongs to people who already know how the next 30 seconds will go. Derek gave him the portfolio. He was not sure afterward why he did it. The man had not threatened him, had not raised his voice, had not produced anything, shown anything, invoked any authority. He had simply held out his hand and waited, and something in the waiting had made the portfolio feel suddenly like something Derek was holding on behalf of someone else. Marcus took it. He set it on the marble table beside the nearest armchair, the one he had been removed from twice that morning. He pressed his thumb to the left lock. He pressed his index finger to the right. The combinations were 6 digits each, and he entered them in under 4 seconds, the movements of a man who has opened this case 10,000 times. The locks released, both together. A clean, solid click, the same sound the velvet rope hook had made when Derek snapped it shut that morning, but reversed. Opened instead of closed. Marcus reached inside. He produced a document. It was thick 40 pages of dense legal text on heavy cream parchment bound along the left edge with a formal seal. The ink on the final page, the signature page, was dark and slightly raised. Not dry, not entirely. The signatures had been witnessed and notarized at 6:04 that morning, and parchment held moisture longer than ordinary paper. Wet ink. He set it on the marble table. Beside it, he placed a card. Black. Solid, no pattern, no visible number, no name on the front surface. The Centurion card caught the light of the 3 crystal chandeliers and absorbed it entirely. Beside the card, he placed his corporate identification, a hard case gunmetal gray bearing the registered seal of Meridian Capital Group, and beneath it, a name and a title. Marcus Weil, Chief Executive Officer. He stepped back. He did not say anything. He did not gesture toward the documents or explain their contents or look at the room for a reaction. He simply stepped back and stood beside the table hands at his sides and waited for the room to read. The man in the charcoal blazer was the first to stand up. He moved to the table without being invited and looked at the document for a long time. His face as he read underwent a series of small, controlled changes that ended in an expression Marcus recognized. He had seen it across negotiating tables before. It was the expression of a person recalculating. The phones were still up, still recording. The footage they had been capturing for the previous 20 minutes had not stopped rolling. Sarah had moved from the hostess stand to the edge of the lounge entrance. She stood at the boundary of the velvet rope, one hand resting on the post, and she was looking at the document on the table. Her face had gone very still. The shaking in her hand had stopped. Tears had begun quietly without drama, the way tears come when a thing you suspected turns out to be true. Derek had not moved. He stood where Marcus had taken the portfolio from him 6 feet from the table, his Italian shoes planted on the Sterling Grand's marble floor. His platinum pin caught the light. His gelled hair did not move. His brass name tag, the one Marcus had read 3 times and said he would remember, caught the amber glow of the chandeliers and held it. He was looking at the acquisition contract, at the gold seal, at the raised, dark, not quite dry ink of the signatures on the final page, at his own name cited in the operational staff manifest attached as Exhibit C, Derek Holt, VIP Lounge Manager, Sterling Grand Hotel. A hotel that, as of 6:04 that morning, belonged to Marcus Weil. The velvet rope had not kept the power out. It had locked the predator inside with his executioner, and the executioner had just opened his case. The room held its breath, held its, not the performative silence of an audience watching a confrontation, something older than that, the silence of a verdict being read in a room where everyone already knows the outcome but must wait for the words anyway. Derek's platinum pin rose and fell with his breathing. His gelled hair caught the chandelier light. His Italian shoes planted on the marble floor did not move. He was looking at the document on the table, at the gold seal, at the raised ink of the signatures at Exhibit C, and the 4 words beside his name that now meant something entirely different than they had meant that morning. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Marcus waited. He was good at waiting. He had demonstrated this repeatedly across 11 hours in a boardroom across a morning, on a lobby bench across every minute of every hour that Derek had spent performing dominance for an audience that was still phones raised recording. Derek started. He stopped. He looked at the Centurion card on the table. He looked at the corporate ID. He looked at Marcus's canvas sneakers on the marble floor of the lounge, and then very quickly looked away from them. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no way of knowing who you—" "Derek," Marcus said. One word. The same weight as the one that had opened this chapter. Not loud, not cold exactly, the temperature of something that has already been decided. Derek stopped talking. "You turned 2 men away from this entrance this morning," Marcus said. "Before me. I watched from the elevator." He paused. He looked at the brass name tag. "That pattern has a history here. I've read the complaint log." Derek's face changed. The color left it in a way that was technically visible from across the room. His chin, which had been lifted in various configurations of authority all morning, dropped toward his chest. His hand moved toward his lapel pin, the habitual self-steadying gesture he had repeated 20 times since sunrise, and then stopped suspended halfway as if he had forgotten what the gesture was for. "You're terminated," Marcus said. "Effective now." The words landed in the silence without echo. They did not need echo. They were not dramatic. They were administrative, clean, and entirely final. Derek's knees went first, not all the way. He did not collapse. He descended slowly in the manner of a man whose legs have made a decision his pride has not yet ratified, until he was kneeling on the marble floor of the VIP lounge in his $2,000 Italian suit, his hands open at his sides, his platinum pin tilted at an angle it had never been tilted before. "Please," he said. His voice had changed entirely. The engineering was gone from it. The calibration, the practiced resonance designed to carry exactly as far as he intended and no further. What remained was smaller, unprocessed. "Please, I can explain the decisions I made. I was protecting the interests of the clientele. I was following the established culture of the culture," Marcus said, "is what I'm here to change." He turned to the guard. The guard was standing where he had stopped after Marcus had broken his grip 2 paces back, his expression occupying the difficult territory between professional neutrality and something that looked around the eyes like relief. He was a large man who had spent the morning following orders without examining them, and the examination, now that it had arrived uninvited, appeared to be uncomfortable. "Escort him out," Marcus said. "Front entrance. His personal items will be sent to him." The guard nodded. He crossed to Derek and placed one hand carefully on the kneeling man's arm, not with the force he had used on Marcus, with the functional, impersonal grip of someone performing a necessary task. He brought Derek upright. Derek came up slowly, unsteadily, his Italian shoes scraping against the marble with a sound that was almost inaudible and somehow carried across the entire silent room. As Derek rose, his brass name tag caught on the lapel of his jacket and pulled free. It did not fall dramatically. It fell the way small things fall, without ceremony, without trajectory, straight down, and struck the marble floor with a thin, bright, definitive sound. No one picked it up. The guard walked Derek through the lounge, past the table with the acquisition contract and the Centurion card and the corporate ID arranged on its surface, past the marble planter with the dark coffee stain dried into its base, past the tables of guests, some of whom lowered their phones as the procession moved through, and some of whom did not, past the velvet rope still unhooked from where Marcus had left it that morning, through the lobby, through the heavy glass doors at the front entrance. The doors closed behind them with a sound that was in the context of the morning exactly right. The heavy, absolute click of glass meeting frame of a mechanism engaging of a threshold becoming a boundary. Inside the room exhaled. Marcus looked at the velvet rope hanging loose from its post. He crossed to it. He picked up the gold-plated hook and looked at it for a moment, its weight in his hand, the same hook Derek had snapped shut against him 10 hours earlier. He set it aside on the concierge table gently, without ceremony. He did not rehang it. Then he turned to Sarah. She was standing at the entrance, one hand still resting on the post, her face carrying everything the morning had accumulated. The tears had dried. What remained in her eyes was something more complex than relief. It was the expression of a person who had watched something unjust happen, had been unable to stop it, and was only now being released from the weight of that specific helplessness. "Sarah," Marcus said. She looked at him. "How long have you worked this lounge?" 11 months, she said. Her voice was steady, not because it came easily, because she made it so. Marcus nodded. He looked at the lounge behind him, at the crystal chandeliers, the deep leather armchairs, the marble floors, the 3 tables of guests who were watching quietly, their phones finally lowered. He looked at the brass name tag on the floor where it had fallen. "It needs a manager," he said. "Someone who's been paying attention." Sarah blinked. She opened her mouth. She closed it. "Starting Monday," Marcus said. "We'll talk terms this afternoon." He picked up the acquisition contract from the marble table, the heavy cream parchment with its gold seal and its raised dark permanent ink. He folded it once and returned it to the portfolio. He pressed the combination locks closed, both together, the same clean double click as before. He lifted the portfolio. He stepped over the velvet rope post smoothly without looking down. He walked toward the lobby exit. his canvas sneakers quiet on the marble, his faded denim jacket carrying the morning on its shoulders the way it had carried every other morning before it, without announcement, without apology. At the glass doors he paused. Outside, Derek Holt stood on the pavement in his Italian suit, his severed name tag somewhere on the marble behind him, his platinum pin still tilted at its wrong angle. He was looking at the doors, at Marcus behind them. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Just a moment. "I believe," Marcus said quietly, "the public restrooms are down the street." He pushed through the doors and walked into the morning.
Fiction. But that feeling, it hits right in your core sense of justice. I'll admit, watching arrogant gatekeepers lose everything they hold dear never gets old. What would you do if you held the secret to your abuser's immediate downfall? Drop a comment, like, share, subscribe.